You're watching the free version of SynthEyes Essentials. For projects and footage, head to BorisFX.com for the premium download. Hello and welcome back to SynthEyes Essentials. We've covered a lot of topics in the last few classes, from feature and supervised tracking to rotor masking, from coordinate systems to geometry and real-world scaling. For this class, I've got this shot, where we can bring everything we've learned together and combine it to achieve a track of both the car and the camera. Along the way, we will pepper in some new tips and tricks to add to your skill set. Before we get to all of that, I want to start with analyzing the shot and laying out a strategy for it. If you already played around with some of your own shots, you'll know that a lot of trial and error can go into figuring out the correct approach for a shot. That's perfectly normal. Over time, as you gain more experience, you'll get a better gut feeling on which approach is the most promising. But whether you're just starting out or are already an experienced match-moving artist, you will always benefit from a well laid out strategy. If we take a look at the background, we see that we've got very stable lighting and a drone shot that, on its own, doesn't look too difficult. Also, there doesn't seem to be a lot of wind going through the field and the tree, so those can be expected to supply a source for a lot of feature trackers. But as we also want to track the motion of the car, we will also have to take a look there. And the polished black coating of the car will give us a hard time. It's also highly reflective, so we need to be extra careful. The glass on top of the roof and the windshield will also obstruct a lot of trackable features. To make a long story short, the car itself just screams supervised tracking. This is where I want to start. And one thing I can immediately see is that the ungraded, flat look will not do me any favors. So in the image preprocessor, I will crunch the blacks and whites in a bit on the curve down here. I will speed up the recording as I used all the techniques we are already familiar with from class number 5. In essence, I had to stick to very traditional RGB tracking, as neither the points nor the corner mode were able to get a grip on the reflective coating of the car. Like with the camera tracks, I was looking not only for a sheer number of trackers, but also I tried to cover as much parallax as possible. All of these trackers required quite some supervision, so I had to drop in a lot of manual adjustments to counter any drift caused by the reflections. In the end, I got to 25 trackers. I treated this like any traditional supervised tracking up until this point, so SynthEyes has got no idea yet that these are sitting on a moving object. Let's see what happens if we solve the scene now. In the solver room, we solve our shot with the default settings. On its own, the solve doesn't look too bad. The point cloud even looks like something resembling a car. Problem is though, only the camera is moving. So while we would be able to attach a geometry onto the car and it would sit in place, we couldn't do the same thing for anything in the background. So this is only partially useful. What SynthEyes needs now is an object inside its scene that it can associate the trackers and hence the movement with. So let's go up to the shot menu and add a moving object. The green trackers on our car turn turquoise, and if we zoom out a little bit, we can see a small diamond is added to the center of our coordinate system. That is our moving object. Also, take a look here. This is our active tracker host. We didn't have to care about this dropdown previously because we always tracked to solve the camera, so this was always set to camera 1. But now we can switch between the camera and our object. And why did our trackers turn turquoise? Because the moment we added the moving object, this new object was made the active tracker host, and SynthEyes will always turn trackers associated with the inactive host turquoise. If we switch our active tracker host back to the camera, they become green again. Let's undo this camera solve and let's instead take a look at what an object solve will look like. To move the trackers from the camera to the object, we will use a very simple trick. Make sure that camera 1 is your active tracker host so that your trackers are all green. Select all trackers by pressing Alt-A. Once they are selected, they are all turned red. In the coordinates room, switch the drop-down left to the *3 button to Object 1, and SynthEyes will ask us whether we want to clone or move the trackers to the object. As the car is moving all the time, and having them in the camera host as well would only throw off the camera solve, let's click No to just move them. the trackers turn turquoise again. And select Object 1 as the active tracker host and go to the solver room. Now click Go again. The solver comes up with a pretty similar HPIX error, but now the little diamond representing the object is in the middle of our point cloud and has got a motion path associated with it. The camera is there, doing nothing, as it has got no trackers associated with it. So like before, this is only partially useful. Let's illustrate this point even more by bringing up a floating hierarchy view. The camera is at the top of our hierarchy, but has got no trackers associated with it yet. The object, however, has got 25 trackers. So now we know that both the camera and the object have their own set of trackers and also their own dedicated solver. But as long as we don't have enough trackers associated with both the camera and the object, both the object and the camera will not move correctly. We established earlier that our angle of attack for tracking the background would be feature tracking. But if I would just feature track the entire shot, I wouldn't end up with trackers on the car. As we've already used MaskML a couple of times in this course, I already prepped the mask. I've just hidden it from you for a more streamlined view. So, if you ever want to adjust the visibility of any roto or MaskML MED, just use the alpha visibility slider down here in the HUD. Note that this is only a viewer adjustment and does not influence the transparency of the MED itself. Now on to the feature tracking. The background doesn't move that much, but it has got some noise that might throw the traditional feature tracking off somewhat. I could go to the image preprocessor and do some denoising, but instead I'm going to opt for the ML motion estimation. I will also up the tracker length and both the small and the big blip size. And I think something like 600 trackers doesn't sound too bad. Let's blip those frames and peel. There's one thing I'd like to point out. The order I'm showing you here is by no means mandatory. I wanted to illustrate to you what SynthEyes sees when just performing either a camera or an object solve, but nothing is preventing you from tracking the camera first and then the object, or track them all at once and use roto or MaskML to discern between the camera and the object. SynthEyes is really flexible in this regard. Before we start solving away, remember that we already have a solve on our object, so for clarity's sake, I'm just going to remove that. To be very clear on this, both the camera and the object have dedicated solvers, and they can be set up to different modes, or you can even disable one of them. But in the end, we are after one coherent solve for our scene, so it's best to always keep an eye out for both solvers. As the object we are tracking will always be dependent of the camera track, they cannot be treated in total isolation. With that being said, now that both are set to automatic, let's solve away. Note that our solver window returns a substantially longer list, and in the end it actually gives us two HPIX errors, one for the camera and one for the object. You will also notice that the error curve mini view will always display the error curve of the active tracker host. But both HPIX errors look pretty decent, so let's take a look at our point cloud. Both the camera and the object now have a motion path, and both do look pretty sensible. Our car looks more like a submarine being submerged below the ground. This is one thing where we will need to help SynthEyes along a little bit, as it has not yet got an idea of the scale on both the world and the car. So this is something we will need to address when we get to the coordinate system setup. But first, let's bring down the error value a bit more. Bringing up the cleanup trackers dialog, I will use the defaults to fix the trackers to then refine the scene. The error is down to 0.76 and there are no big spikes on my error curve mini view. Hooray! But our car submerged even more, so this is basically screaming for proper constraints. And to be very clear on this, I only refined the trackers for the camera, not the object. That once again is dependent on the active tracker host that I have chosen, so always keep an eye out for this dropdown to not mess up your scene. In this first part, we got an idea of the difference between the different tracker hosts and how to transfer trackers between them. Let's use this as a base in the second part of this class, where we will fix the scaling of our scene. See you there.